series here at Hop City. A little bit about what inspired this, myself being an evangelist for beer and recognizing how much of an institution Hop City has played in the homebrewers community as Atlanta has grown into becoming a recognized beer city, having breweries that are now in the spotlight nationally, taking a step back and recognizing the connection. We offer homebrew classes, we offer homebrew supplies, we offer that relationship to people who are passionate about all these different elements, both drinking and the community that it creates here. On the Brewers Lecture Series, we've taken different topical themes, created a more informal Q&A direct to a brewer specifically, and then allow you as the brewer or fan or consumer or just friend of Hop City to actually have the opportunity to ask specific questions and interact here. We've always offered tasting opportunities weekly. Sometimes it's with a rep, sometimes it's with the brewer. But this allows you to really sort of be that geek that your friends try and hush when you go to a brewery and a brewery tour, like myself. Tonight we are welcoming Allagash. They are so kind enough to come down from Portland, Maine. They have been a brewery since 1995, so they've really kind of set a precedent not just for perfection brewing, but also being one of the first breweries nationally to really address what makes Belgian beers unique. And in particular, that funky little word we like to call Brett or Brettanomyces, which makes your everyday IPA or Belgian yeast strains just a little bit tart, a little bit sweet, a little bit woolly, if you will, a little bit earthier. And there's all sorts of different ways that you can talk about or utilize it in the brewing process. It can be a little finicky, it can be a little evasive. Tom Bonafair is here to address all of those questions, and tonight we are also featuring Allagash, a little mini tap takeover, and our growlers. So we are pouring Little Brett to start you off with. We also have hoppy table beer in package. We are featuring as well the Josephine, which has not really come into the Georgia market before. Ray?
Super limited, kegs only down here. So.
Perfect.
Yeah.
The Cuvée Industrial, which is a select blend every year, so they go through all of their barrels and pretty much do a custom blending of it for that particular year. The Fluxus from 2016, which we have both in bottle, which is a ginger influenced, and then we have bottled format, and I'll probably get to that possibly later, of the 2017, which has rhubarb. If you have any other questions, by all means, talk to any of us here at the store. We're always happy to help, but we're mostly happy to have our friends from Allagash here, and I'll let you have the floor for the rest of the night. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, can everybody hear me? My voice kind of vanishes pretty quick. I'm Tom, this is Ray. First and foremost, I don't do these presentations ever, so this will be a learning process. I've been working at Allagash since 2005 in production, brewing, production cellaring. I do a little bit of safety management now, but I'd say 80% of my day is onesie, boots, gloves, glasses, making wort, cleaning up after it, prepping hoses, prepping tanks. And Ray is our Georgia sales rep. So he lives here, I live in Portland. I just flew in today to kind of come here and run this presentation and also support the Shelton Mania this weekend. So happy to be here, and thanks to Hop City and Brittany for hosting. Ray, do you have anything to introduce? Do you want to talk about what you do here?
Yeah, so I'm the Georgia Territory Manager. Been on board with Allagash since November of last year. Super excited to be with the brewery that is passionate about beer and about the culture just as much as I am. Love Hop City. They support us very well. So, wanted to bring Tom in just to kind of share our story, bring Maine to Georgia. We're almost the opposite ends of the East Coast. So thank you guys for coming out today. We'll kind of jump into to the brewery, kind of explain some of the ins and outs of it, and day-to-day basis of what Tom does, and then kind of dive into obviously Brettanomyces and spontaneous fermentation. So
Everybody's got some little Brett right now? Okay, we'll get to that. We'll talk about that in detail. This is, who's been to the brewery? Anybody? Raise your hand. Nobody. Who's been to Maine? Okay. Well, next time you go to Maine, you're probably going to be either passing through Portland or in Portland. Please come see us. We're in Portland. We're not downtown. We're on the edge of Portland, but we're still Portland. And that's what the brewery looks like when you pull in. That's a fancy new food truck staging area, which is awesome.
This is what the brewery looks like when you pull in during the spring and summer.
It's not, it doesn't snow there all the time. All right, so this is where I spend all my time. That's hot side, we call it. I'm making wort all day long, 5 batches at a time sometimes. Brettanomyces not in the picture at that point. We're talking about 212 degree sweet grain water. You put bread in that and it dies. So down here is a heat exchanger which cools it off, send it into the cellars, and then we're talking about pitching yeast, whether it's a saison yeast at first and Brett down the line, or completely Brett from the get-go. But this is our very fancy Braucon brand brewhouse. 5 vessels, German hand-laid tile, which was pretty cool to watch them do that, hands and knees, one at a time. This gigantic vessel is full of 190 degree hot water. Can you see?
You're good.
It's really a fun visit. The tour really only had one complaint over the years, which was we can't hear what they're saying because we're in full production. So we just got these fancy new headsets which amazingly amplify the tour guide's voice and also allow some ambient, production noise, so to speak.
Not just any normal headset though. It kind of looks like a NASCAR race.
Yeah, it costs a
we're
fortune.
talking, we're talking full on, pit crew style. So.
All right, these guys, barrels of all sizes. We've got some foeders, these big guys, which wineries love to use and we love to buy when they're done with them. They're not easy to come by. We are always on the hunt. Even though we don't have space, we still buy them. To the left, those look like coolship barrels to me. Pretty big versus a bourbon barrel. That building that houses those wild barrels is next to the current brewery. It is the location of the original brewery. When I started, there were about 8 of us. And I could park right in front of the brewery, walk right in. If free beer showed up from another brewery, I got a 6-pack of it because there were so few of us. And now there's 135. And I have to park across the street, 5-minute walk. I get a bottle if I'm lucky of gift beer. Just a little evolution of the company. This is included in the tour, the barrel room. It's one of the highlights of the tour. Samples are poured, people can kind of mill around and get a look at the barrels. They've got fun names. It smells like funky wood deliciousness in there. That is a coolship barrel. Who's familiar with our coolship beer? Anybody? Spontaneously fermented.
What's an example of one of your coolship beers that we might recognize?
We have coolship beers such as Resurgam. That's kind of like our straight goose, like Cantillon's base lambic. Their goose. The Resurgam is in that vein. We make Coolship Cerise, which has cherries, Coolship Red, which has raspberries, deliciously tart and fruity. This is very early on in the spontaneous process.
A lot of those we don't get here in Georgia in large quantities, but we will get your smaller batch specialized like
coolship beers are very limited quantity. They are almost exclusively snapped up at the retail shop at the brewery within a couple of weeks, if not days. A coolship is a shallow stainless steel vessel that hot wort is pumped into, left out overnight to cool, and in the morning when it's at the appropriate temperature, we pump it back into the building, into a stainless vessel, homogenize it, and then from there into those barrels. 2 days later, 3, you see that krausening, bubbling activity, hopefully. I mean, if everything goes well, that is spontaneous yeast eating sugar, making alcohol and carbonation.
Yeah. So just think of this as like a huge brownie pan, and these windows are, just open during the time of year that we do this. Majority in the fall, early fall.
Fall and spring.
Yeah.
Mostly fall now. Spring is pretty unpredictable. The temperature has to be just right. It can't be too cool. It can't be.
I'm curious why those times of year.
It's the nighttime temperature. We don't want freezing, but we want 48, 46.
Is it because that's when the bacteria that you want is most prevalent, or the bacteria you don't want is least prevalent?
Kick back
or
a step to the steam coming out of the windows. So the 200-degree wort is pumped into that stainless brownie tray, large brownie tray. The whole entire room just fills up with sweet-smelling steam, which comes in contact with the ceiling, which is made of wood. That never gets cleaned. That's just a housing of funk, like indigenous to that room. And then, we all go home, and in the wee hours, it cools down gradually, and through the windows drift in whatever's in the neighborhood. Microflora, bacteria, the spontaneous yeast that eventually inoculates that wort. Nothing is pitched. There's no pitchable, for anybody who home brews, you know what I'm talking about when I say pitch. It's just yeast from the environment. And that's the trick with spontaneous beer. And that room is now just precious. I mean, the environment in there is proven to be capable of making good spontaneous beer.
Does that make your reputation for having like the mother type of funk, type of organism?
Well, the organisms that eventually get into that wort, again, are coming from the air, coming from the wood.
That room kind of is the mother, I think, basically.
Okay.
It stores all the fun funk. Right?
Yeah, I mean, there's.
Right.
Right. No liquid is dumped in. Nothing. No slurry.
So it's just in the air.
It was a big risk to begin with. I mean, we didn't know when we put that in the coolship, and with the windows open and the steam, we were hoping that this would work. And a few days later, we're anxiously looking at the barrels, and one of them popped a bung, and then one of them made a mess, and it was the best feeling.
Yeah.
Did you model that after something over in Europe?
Big time. This is 100% Belgian tradition. We call our beer spontaneous. We don't say lambic, out of respect.
So, quick question, and it's just been a rumor I've heard for a long time, but I've always heard that Allagash is obviously one of the front runners in America for using Brett in their beer. But I've always heard that the first time that you guys, discovered Brett was by accident. Is that true?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, I won't deny that.
Okay.
And that was in the building with the barrels that I said was the original brewery. We had, more rudimentary technology. Our commitment to sanitary practice was still impeccable, but we're dealing with hoses with removable stainless ends instead of fancy 17-layer food-grade hoses.
Yeah.
So we picked up a wild yeast indigenous to that building that happened to produce delicious beer.
Yeah.
And that became the house Brett. We call it Brett Michaels. And we cultured it up. Y Yeast kept it for us. and now we can order it, phone call.
I just want to know that the guy wasn't trying that beer for the first time.
I can tell you the guy who, accidentally found that strain of Brett
Yeah.
because the hose end probably dragged him on the ground. And that's my boss, Jason Perkins, who's the brewmaster.
So you say why yeast has that strain? Is that publicly available, or they
Certainly
hang
not.
on to it?
No.
Okay.
No. It's in their bank for our needs alone.
So homebrewers can't pick it up and brew
No.
with it.
A really spectacular home brewer might be able to scrounge some out of Interlude or, whatever
Bottle
else we use it in and
yeah.
prop it up. It would be impressive, but it's not possible.
And I've heard of home brewers doing that,
Yeah.
taking dries. Is that something that is
We don't discourage that.
efficient or viable, or you just can neither confirm nor deny?
I think you're up against it if you're trying to do that. I think we probably want to hire you. Like that's a skill. I mean, we have enough trouble as it is in our lab, propping up things in ideal conditions with perfect media and temperature. So that catches the whole leaf aged hops. They stink like cheese. I have them all over the place up at my level in the brew house in bags aging in the sun. But so that's kind of an intro to Coolship. Not really Brett, but fun beers nonetheless. A reason to come to the brewery, honestly, because she's right. You're not going to get them down here.
Yeah.
We just don't have enough of them. But if you time it up on your visit to the brewery, you can snap some up. Your question?
For a coolship house, do you ever pay attention to what you have growing on the outside in terms of like trees? The trees that are around it, there's something that like could
Nothing that
contribute.
we engineered. We kind of just took what we got in the surrounding tree line. Nothing's planted or rigged up. The window's open as much as, we bought these from an old church.
The hardest part is always consistency and making sure that you're getting it, the hardest, because you never know what's going to fly in one time versus
True.
the next batch. So I didn't know if a tree died, and like, do you ever try to like replicate what was there before?
No,
or-
I think now that this bicycle's worn in, we're getting a lot of it from the room. Not to undersell the air that's coming in,
Yeah.
but initially that was the big risk. Like, we don't have anything in there yet. It's kind of a fresh space. We were really truly relying on the drift, but now fortunately, like I said, it's kind of a precious environment that we have known flavors that come from pretty consistently in a style that's known for inconsistency.
Precious environment, like you said. Walking into this place, obviously with the church windows that are, pushed out and everything, you kind of get taken back, and it's just you kind of step into a different role when you step in this tiny room, literally no bigger than the area we're standing in now. It's literally devoted to just whatever happens, and it's cool to be able to see the tree lines and see all the stuff that's in there. And you talk about control. You're almost just letting nature do its work at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
you can
So,
control it hot side. We have the recipe down exactly.
Yeah.
What type of grain, how long to boil. It's a very long boil. We want to extract every possible nutrient from the grain for that long fermentation in the barrel.
Especially with the you said you got a 5-vessel system, which is not.
The Coolship all happens on our old brew house. We have 2 brew houses.
Okay.
We have an original 30-barrel system, which I learned on, and then we have the badass Braucon 60-barrel. So Coolship happens on the old system with a lot of rigging, and because you're basically boiling straight mash. Like, you want everything from that grain that could possibly be food for the wild yeast.
Do you ever treat wood, like put wood that isn't currently in use for like building out another place? If you put wood in there, maybe it absorbs some of the bacteria and various things from the environment that could be used in another facility at some point? Expansion possibly?
We would be very sad if that wood ever left that room.
Well, adding more that's not used currently.
If we wanted to build another Coolship.
Yeah, like if you wanted to inoculate that wood with over a period of seasons, you put that wood in there while it's brewing, possibly on the roof or where towards the ceiling.
Right. Potentially, you could use the current wood as like a starter for another space, but I think that won't ever be interrupted. That room, it's functioning so well that we wouldn't want to endanger that ecosystem, basically. And we did not pre-treat anything in that room. It was a leap of faith. So that's a little sell sheet that we make up for folks in the trade who are, like Hop City, trying to sell certain beers of ours. Gives you a little explanation of what you're drinking now, which is a little Brett. We can transition into the Brett talk now, I think. So if everybody's tried that, I think you'd admit that there's a tropical pineapple explosion in your mouth.
Yeah.
With a little touch of bread crust, definitely some funk. Do we have these out and about?
Yeah,
we do, right?
Has those, yeah.
Okay, so we made this little cheat sheet up for the trade to give people an idea of how we look at Brett. And there are a lot of flavors in this little rainbow that Brett can be, plenty of which we don't want our beers to taste like sour milk or yogurt or cheese, not so much. We're really looking for tropical fruit, barnyardy, horsey, if that's a crazy thing to call beer, but Brett can be like that. Bread crust, potentially a little Band-Aidy at first. But that's like the tropical. Is it tropical? Is it Band-Aidy? It's up to your palate. Brett beers aren't for everybody. My girlfriend, not a fan. Not a fan of Brett beers or sour beers. So more for me.
Yeah, so I mean, what I love about this beer is kind of from a sales and consumer aspect of things. It's very approachable at the level that it is, 4.8%. It's like you said, tropical, fruity. Obviously, the way things are going now, everybody's into the tropical and fruity aspect of things. What's cool about this one, there's only pretty much one of everything. One malt or 2-row barley blend, one hop mosaic, and our Brettanomyces strain, Brett Michaels, like you said. It's easy drinking beer. Is perfect for the weather that we have now, kind of that mid 80 to 90 degree, and at the ABV, you can kind of, like I tell people, you can drink 4 to 10 of them and not feel bad about yourself. Or at least
4 to 10.
I don't feel bad about myself. And as you can see, limited release. So this one's, one of those type of beers that just, gets one pallet in the state type thing, and usually goes out pretty quick. We tend to do that every other month with the limited style of beer, and always ever changing when it comes to those two.
Big staff favorite, this one.
Yeah.
A lot of us like Mosaic in IPAs, in fun beers like this. The 2-row base blend that he mentioned is what we use in white. It's what we use in triple. Breese makes that for us. Breese is out of Wisconsin. They're, a fantastic partner of ours. They're our main maltster. So this was the brainchild of one of my good friends at the brewery, Evan Culver, who is the champion of Mosaic in his personal life and at the brewery. And he kept it simple, like Ray said. One type of yeast, one type of malt, one type of hop, and 2.5 months of fermentation, and then we dose it up, package it, bottle re-ferment it, and take it home.
Just add a patio.
Right. I guess the 2.5 months, kind of a long primary fermentation period, certainly much longer than white. That's what Brett takes. Brett's a slow eater. If you don't allow Brett enough time to ferment, I would say in a nutshell, the big risk is over-pressurization in your package. Once it's in the bottle or the keg, that bread, if it's not done eating, will just consume whatever it can get its hands on, and the byproduct is carbon dioxide, and you're potentially going to blow bottles. So one lesson with bread is patience. Patience in primary fermentation. It ties up the tank for a while, and you just live with it. You check the gravity every day, and then maybe twice a week, and then once a week, and it should be chipping away until it's done. That makes sense?
Yeah, so kind of, like you said, talking about the beer itself real quick, and the fact that Evan came up with this recipe. What's cool about Allagash is, and talking with the home brewers and people that have brewed beer before, we get the opportunity to put any of our recipes or any of our ideas on our pilot system at any given moment. I would say a lot of our specialty beers and a lot of beers that we put out are brainchilds of different people across the brewery. I mean, from marketing to HR to brewers to people that are in our guest relations. So anytime we can take our ideas and put it on a smaller scale, and hopefully it turns out and everybody drinks it at the brewery and gives a thumbs up, we get to go on to production. So
that's the third system in the house. So I mentioned we showed you a picture of the Braucon system, and I mentioned the 30-barrel system that kind of started the brewery, which is still in existence, and we make coolship on, and some smaller experimental. But even smaller than that is a tiny little, it's pretty fancy, but it's small, pilot system, which is available to anybody at the company to write up an idea. There's a pilot team that helps them come up with a recipe, and then they spend a day brewing it, and staff tries it, and there definitely have been major production beers that have come out of that pilot system, pilot program. What do we got next?
One barrel.
It depends. It's capable of doing one, a little more. Depends on the recipe.
Maybe not available in Facebook.
But we've sampled some people on it. I mean, if it gets to that point, it's probably going to be made on a larger scale. That beer started on the pilot system. We do an anniversary beer every year called Fluxus, which is Latin for continuous change. And this most recent Fluxus, which is available in bottles here, is a mixed blend. It's a Saison yeast and Brett with rhubarb, a ton of rhubarb, and it's delicious. It's got the funky Brett characteristics along with a little bit of rhubarb tartness. So we can pour some of that too once they're cold.
I think
that'll probably be next.
Yeah. What's good about this beer, I was very excited to see this one coming down a couple months back. Being in Georgia and lived in Georgia the majority of my life, strawberry rhubarb. So this guy right here, it reminds me of Georgia summer. Like you said, it kind of drinks with a mild sweetness, some tartness, and I think the rhubarb really plays well at the end with that kind of sweetness aspect of things. It kind of always amazes me with just yeast itself, the different flavors that you can get out of that. And I think it sometimes gets overshadowed when we're, some people talk about, So
in this current environment of hop mania, Ray's exactly right. I think, especially with Belgian styles, the yeast is probably the #1 driving factor for flavors and aromas. If we were making West Coast IPAs, probably not so much, but where we play, yeast is like the boss. So I mentioned the mixed fermentation on this particular beer. I guess I'd also like to talk a little bit more about this card. We went out of our way basically to stress that bread beers are not always sour beers. They can be, but it's not hand in hand. A beer like Little Brett that you already sampled is not sour, but it's full of breath. Then there are beers that you can introduce lacto with the Brett and they go hand in hand, but they're not codependent, so to speak. Any questions on anybody using Brett in homebrew? No? Any luck with it? I mean, it's a temperamental. It's very slow eater. You've had them explode in the bottle.
Yeah.
That's that continuous eating I'm talking about.
I didn't realize that it was 2.5 to 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, just keep using your hydrometer and make sure it's bottomed out.
It'll eat down to nothing, but we did a pretty good Brett Saison with it. actually a fantastic Brett saison with it. So,
And
but
it took its time, didn't it?
it took a while, yeah. But cork and cage because you got it, because you don't know.
For safety, it's true.
Yeah.
Anybody drink Orval? Or
Yes.
heard of Orval?
Yeah.
That bottle is a very exclusive shape. It's kind of a teardrop shape. That bottle is extremely tough and capable of withstanding many volumes of CO2 in an outward direction, because that is a hoppy Brett beer, and I think they weren't messing around. And you know, even though they're very good at what they do, they wanted to make sure that they didn't have bottles exploding 6 months down the line after they left Belgium. Yeah, so Ray's going to pour a couple samples of the Fluxus with the rhubarb, which is available here at Hop City for anyone who's interested in taking some home.
So does Brett contaminate your equipment as bad as?
Good
lactose?
question. Good question. So I mentioned that facility next door to the brewery where the wild barrels are. That facility is separate. You have to walk out of the brewery, down the steps, cross a driveway into another building. We like to separate wild and tame because, like you said, contamination is a real threat when you're dealing with Brett, lacto, PDO, anything funky, because in the brewery we're just making sweet wort that's fuel for those microbes to go berserk. We have a different set of equipment completely, white gaskets instead of black gaskets, hoses that have yellow tape on them, like do not put any white beer through these, so
Just-
forth.
I've never used Brett, so I've been curious of
Be very
treat it the same way you would.
over the top, sanitary, and crank up the anxiety, because you know Brett will find a way to stay in your equipment and wreck your next beer, and then you'll be making nothing but Brett beers.
So we have wild yeasts here for sale as part of our homebrew department, but do you have any sort of caveat or expert advice for utilizing commercialized propagations of
I don't homebrew. I spend enough time commercial brewing, which is mostly cleaning, FYI. You clean before the wort gets in the vessel, and then when it leaves, you have to clean up after it. It's a lot of cleaning. So I can't recommend exact homebrew techniques, but like I said a little bit about patience, be prepared for one carboy to be tied up for up to 2 months. And that's just the way it is. And you need warmer temperatures in general with Brett to make it happen. Very prime.
So it seems kind of like a contradiction, because if you're utilizing a coolship method, you want more colder ambient temperatures for spontaneous fermentation. But then playing with mixed fermentation, or once you've moved into Brett, you want a happier, warmer, cozier
Right.
space.
So
So how do you negotiate between those two environments if you were, regardless of the scale that you're working in, transferring?
coolship experimentation would be sort of tricky at home. I guess I'd rather talk more about experimenting with Brett at home, which a Brett beer starts off like white beer. You're going to make hot wort, you're going to cool it down, maybe not, you know, to mid 60s like a white beer, maybe 72, and then introduce the Brett yeast at that temperature versus the coolship wort, which just goes from 200 down to, you know, whatever we in the morning when we transfer it out. There's no yeast being pitched, if that makes sense. So there are converse strategies. This is the Orval bottle that I was talking about. It's a pretty shape, but I think it's also a technique of protecting the contents from getting out all over your bag if you're taking it back from Belgium. You want to advance it? All right, so everybody has some of that beer. You kind of get the slight tartness, a little bit of funk. different than the Little Brett, not as tropical. This is the blended beer that Brittany mentioned. That's over 20 different barrels blended into one concoction. That's a fun activity, figuring out which barrels to add and which to reject. A lot of pictures on a table and a lot of discussions and notes. No fighting. Ray, do you have anything to add on Cuvée?
Yeah, so 24 barrels, like you said. You know, it's kind of cool. Saw the barrels stacked up in the beginning picture that we had, kind of the barrel room that we have. Going in there and just pulling pins, you know, and kind of filling up and just, it's, you know, kind of like, you know, mixing a Jack and Coke and a Sprite and orange juice and making a, you know, almost like a suicide type thing. So this is the best suicide I've ever had in my life. So hopefully we can get a little bit poured on this one. Again, this is kind of a super limited beer for us. We're lucky enough to get a keg down on this one. Very few bottles of this bottled up, and you know we'll be pouring this one also tomorrow at Shelton Fest. You know, along with some of we have one of our coolship beers there too. So you know we've talked a lot about the coolship and can't really get it in bottles down here, but we'll have it there. So if you guys are there, come by and taste it for sure. But you know, when I first tasted this beer, it just kind of blew my mind to kind of look at even the description of it. Apple, grape, caramel, and clove. I mean, if you made something with those ingredients in it, that necessarily seemed like it would go together. But you look at the barrels that are in, I mean, some chestnuts, some ports, some rum, aquavit, some we're talking, you know, an aperitif, oak, you know, red wine, rum. I mean, there's just so many different aspects that are in this beer. So,
Sauternes.
yeah.
Sauternes.
Yeah, so you get Brett in there, but it's mixed in with so many other flavors that it's not Brett forward versus a Little Brett, which is just like, Brett, here I am, loud and clear.
Yeah. I mean, this one, the Brett shares the lacto, the beta, the saccharin.
And hopefully it all works.
Yeah.
That's the art of blending.
Yeah.
Do you blend purely by taste, or is there any?
Nose is big. If I get invited to those meetings, I smell everything and then taste. But yes, it's by taste. There's no program you punch it into. It's a bunch of experienced folk at the brewery who weigh in, and you know that's what's going to be blended, and it's kind of gut feeling based on. There's voting. My boss has the
Very skewed voting.
Jason Perkins
Very
has
skewed
the
voting on that
ultimate
one.
because he's got the master palate in the building.
Jason Perkins,
Yeah.
the golden palate.
What is the age range between the barrels when you blend them? 2 years?
Oh,
6 months?
it's everything under the sun. 5 years, 3 years,
Yeah.
2 years.
Just think about it, it's like like the Brady Bunch in a bottle, you know. I mean, just kids of all ages.
Are we gonna pour some of that?
Yeah, we'll get some.
Do you get your barrels from one specific place, or do you like to get from, you know, Buffalo Wild Trays and get from this place and from that? Do you like to try to keep consistency?
Depend. We do for Curieux. Who's had Curieux or heard of it? Those are Jim Beam barrels, and that's an exclusive relationship with them for that beer. You know, we're very happy with those flavors for that beer, so we keep to that track. But for the barrels that end up in Cuvée, some are from a winery, maybe a different winery than the last time, other distilleries, liquor barrels, you name it. It's totally what we can get our hands on, really.
The beer that's blended together, what's the age range? Is there always kind of new beer being brewed that's being added, or is it what's that process like?
I think of those 24, the bulk are go-tos that we're planning to put in that, but then there's some wild cards, because this beer is not going to taste exactly the same every release, and that's okay.
So you don't Solera the beer. You don't do a Solera for the beer where you're adding constantly new beers to the existing.
Not that one.
Okay.
Not that one. So Ray's going to come around and give some dabs of that.
Are there beers that you do Solera? I actually don't know. Do you have a Solera process for any of them?
We have a cool, a folder that does, it's like a base.
Okay.
It's a base for other beers that, never really runs out.
Okay.
Who's going to the Shelton Fest in here? Nice. Well, beeline over for the Resurgam tomorrow. That's what we have, right?
Yeah.
That's tomorrow.
Both days, limited each day. That'll be what people line up at our table to get, I imagine.
Definitely keyword beeline on that one, right? Get over there first.
Dies at a high temperature.
You can kill Brett, yeah, if you're knocking out too hot.
Our solution was to have two sets of equipment, but we still brewed on the same, like our initial
Hot side.
process was the same.
Right, because until you add the Brett, you're not inoculating, you're not wild. It's just hot wort.
I just was curious if we had stumbled into that on accident or if we actually did it right. So, because I grew up with a buddy of mine that lives in Charleston. That's what we did. We just created
one is
two
this?
systems.
This is the Cuvée Industrial.
Oh,
Yeah, hot side, you're good. Once you add the Brett slurry, then you've got to quarantine that or clean the hell out of it if you're going to reuse that.
When you say prop that up, you mean just build the yeast content, right?
We prop up our Brett with, you can use white wort and add oxygen initially, get it real happy.
Well, I use a stir plate. We've been doing that for 10 years, me and my buddy, to steal beer from the bottom and then reuse that to pitch our home brews. I just was curious when you said that. I didn't realize that was difficult. So maybe we're not doing it right, but it works for us.
Good. And I think once it's in the carboy and bubbling away, don't expect it to be done anywhere near as quickly as a, heady topper clone.
We cheat and we use under the same rule. That's why if they blow up, it's okay.
Yeah, so what does everybody think about this one? Kind of hard to distinct one particular beer out of it for me. I've
Right.
had pretty much every beer that's in this, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
A lot of these colors on this cheat sheet should be coming out.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be anything overwhelming.
This is literally taste the rainbow.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
a Skittles glass for sure, right?
But this is just that red wine.
No,
Fantastic.
I actually, the first taste of it,
I'm a wine drinker, so I prefer a lot of wines, but the first taste I got was Chardonnay, which I don't typically like a Chardonnay, but the butter from it, it was like, it's perfect. Like, that's actually a beer I would be like, let's get a growler, I'll drink that.
And I think if that's what you get, then that's what you're getting. Don't let anyone say, I don't get any of those
one
things.
direction. That's what's good about these beers, and talking with people that just enjoy wine or just are getting into it. What's cool about beers like this is these beers are very good at introducing people to beer, to sours, and you use the whole sour and wild. I love to use wild more than sour because there's two different styles of sours, ones that are kettled and the ones that are spontaneous and have the accurate yeast strains in it. So what's good about this, getting back to the wine, is my wife loves wine, hates beer. I've turned her on to completely adverse beers that people think that are big beers. Avance, which is a bourbon barrel aged strawberry wild ale that we have. Uncommon Crow, which is, and these are all available here, a blackberry wild ale. What's good about that is you get the same notes and a little bit of the tannins and stuff from those barrel qualities that are probably familiar with those.
I can't say exactly that there's Chardonnay barrel-aged beer in that. Not that I'm making up, trying to be vague. There could be.
Yeah, and it probably just kind of transfers.
24, I don't have them all memorized.
No, it's perfect though, it's really good.
So the next one, as you can see, there's no bottle on this one, guys. So this one's strictly draft. So and one that Tom and I were talking. Can't remember last time we tasted this.
That's
one,
kind of a white whale. That
Yeah. So
I don't know that many people have had that.
just use the word whale on that. So
Yeah, whale. What? Whales?
So with this one, I'll let kind of Tom describe this one a little bit and kind of the backstory with the barrel that we use for this one.
So that's kind of a pretty broad grain bill there. The base blend that I mentioned before, the mid-mite wheat is what's going to make this dark colored. The rye adds a little bit of spice. If anybody's a rye beer aficionado, you know what I'm talking about with spice. Not really heat spice, but like a so this is very limited. There's the list of hops. Those are hops. Simcoe's found in a lot of delicious IPAs, very grapefruity, but you don't get that in this. It's kind of overwhelmed by the Brett. It's our house strain again, the Brett Michaels that we nicknamed it. The cognac barrels, I think, are a predominant flavor in this beer. The aging, that's a very strong flavor. So we'll pour that next, and then we can kind of talk about some flavor notes.
They're my favorite. And Josephine and the industrial, unbelievable. Like they're some of the best beers I've ever had in my life.
Cheers to that.
Thank you. If you don't take full advantage of that, you can get a regular limited release beers from them. I think they're in 17 states, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we're in 17 states in DC. So
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.
It's kind of a funny footprint. It's basically the whole eastern seaboard, jump over to Chicagoland, and then to California.
Yeah.
But my point being, you can't, if you lived in the majority of the country, you don't get access to this beer. And you guys in Georgia, you get full access to it. And all the limited stuff, I got every bit of it.
My hope is that some people leave here with a broader understanding that we're more than the white beer. The white beer is fantastic. It paves the way for us to experiment in wild directions. I mean, for every 1 pint of white, there's 75 beers that you might not ever get your hands on, but we're still making them and experimenting. The white is just a different place where we're specializing.
Workhorse is what I love to say about that. Share some numbers. 80% of our sales are white, so it's kind of like our backer, our money guy. White's our money guy for stuff like this, So, it's awesome to work for a brewery that's very innovative and puts so much, even going to white, puts so much work into making sure the quality is up to standards and making sure that every bottle, every pint that's poured is the same. We put, so much money into our QC in our labs. To walk into our lab, I feel like I'm about to sit down and have a doctor's checkup. So many things going on there, so many different tools. So, lets us have beers that are like this. For me, to have a beer like this is 10.4%. It's something that I can pretty much sip on all night long and start getting tingly legs after 2 of them. Is awesome. So.
What's everybody think? Get the cognac?
Yeah.
I get that big time.
Yeah.
Any particular reason?
Fun.
Yeah, it's a cool barrel.
We got our hands on some cognac barrels.
Also pretty hard to find barrels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that we have plans to do much of this in the future. It's, like I said, it's a beer that I'm not 100% familiar with because even working there, we didn't bottle this.
Yeah. This is one of those beers that, you have 2 barrels that are just sitting back in the corner. We're like, all right, let's throw these into kegs and put them in what we call deep stash. So you see beers like this on the list for me, and I'm able to take care of accounts like Hop City, that support us well and bring in all of our standard core stuff and also our experimental stuff, and to bring beers like this for you guys to be able to take a growler home and sip on for a while. So.
Any questions on this one or tasting notes anybody wants to talk about? Popping?
In my face.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like
I definitely get that sweet cognac feel. like a
For me personally, the cognac pops.
Yeah.
But I'm not any more right than you. That's the beauty of open-minded tasting.
That's the beauty. I mean, you go to the brewery and these kind of conversations happen all the time. We sit down with brewers that are, we're face to face with them. We're tasting one thing, and they're tasting another, and that's how we come up with these sell sheets and are able to kind of paint a picture without you guys tasting.
Like the Resurgam, for those of you that get some Resurgam tomorrow, I've heard some people call Goose's footy, which sounds off-putting, but if you grow to like those beers, you seek out that flavor.
Yeah, I mean, you think about kind of descriptors and things that are on our rainbow sheet here. I mean, who was the first person to lick a horse blanket and get that? You know what I'm saying? Or
One Barnyardy.
Yeah, Barnyardy. I mean, this reminds me of just running through a barn open mouth. So it's cool to be able to pick up all these different flavors in beer and the complexities that are in it. So, any more questions that we can answer?
Yeah, they can be about the brewery.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be Brett specific. How are we doing on time? Brittany, how are we doing on time?
Oh,
We're at 7:30, but.
you're kind of done, but at the same time, there's, some people get tired of listening to you.
I work in restaurants, so I'm just curious. Allagash White has been the last 7 restaurants I've worked in the last 5 years. So, did that happen on purpose? I mean, I buy it now. I mean, but I'm just curious. I know it's a fantastic food beer and it's exactly 80%, but I'm curious what y'all's take is on it.
It's by far our top agenda is to broaden people's horizons to that beer, and then we take steps after that to introduce a hoppy table beer or a saison, funkier things like we talked about tonight. But we lead with the white.
Yeah,
I mean, Ray's in sales, he can vouch for that.
Yeah, I mean that's
Nothing else that'll make you feel better.
right. I mean that's
Now a beer that we can actually tell other people who sell others.
Sure.
Bringing that by style.
Yeah.
It's become its own.
Yeah, I mean, you think about that was the first beer we brewed back in 1995. I mean, think about timeline. Blue Moon came out in 1996. So you look at those styles, you look at those, that type of beer. Go back to the quality aspect of things. I mean, with the white, I mean, that's one that I kind of just kick open the door with and say, hey, look, I've got this beer that's amazing. That's 80% of our sales that are, it's just the absolute antithesis of what a white beer is supposed to taste like. There's been so much work put into that beer, so much love and labor, that kind of sells itself at the end of the day. So just making sure that people realize that that's kind of our core and our love child. That's why you see it in a lot of places for sure.
And it's by no means set it and forget it now. That beer requires constant attention. Making a beer hold up haze-wise, not easy due to gravity. You can have all the lab technology in the world, but gravity's gravity. And it's a fun battle.
Yeah, being an unfiltered beer, I mean, if I was to go and take a white bottle right now and pour it like the majority of people pour domestic beer with as little head as possible, I can make that beer almost as clear as a domestic beer. But with just a tiny bit of rousing, get those funky, organisms and unfilteredness, and the Curaçao orange peel, the coriander that's in that, makes it consistent. I mean, makes it just consistent and the most hazy thing you've ever seen in your life. See through it at the beginning, and then with just a tip of the rest of the quarter, it's back to the haze. Same thing happens with kegs. I mean, you think about it. Same thing. Majority of that stuff settles to the bottom, and your tube's not pulling it up, so you're getting a clear beer. So if you ever see that, it's a quick flip. That's why we ship our stuff upside down. Makes people turn to kegs. So if you're ever at home and you're doing something that's unfiltered, and you're getting that inconsistency, you guys use kegs. Just do a quick flip, even the bottom.
I was just going to ask to get back to sort of a technical end on handling Brett. I've always heard about, besides the cleaning aspect, that once you start utilizing, commercial or home brewing, once you start utilizing Brett, you've kind of committed that particular vessel to only utilizing that particular yeast strain. And I didn't know if you can sort of confirm or deny that rumor, or if there's a particular caveat about what makes Brett so unique for handling.
We call, okay, if we're going to use a vessel that's been wild with Brett, for example, and then reuse it for Allagash Black, we nuke that vessel, which is like triple the time, double the chemical, as hot as we can possibly get it, no effing around, as they say. And we change out all the rubber gaskets that we can possibly.
Do you just clean them, or do you absolutely change them?
Those gaskets go next door into the, the pile of wild equipment. But the stainless, we've had luck with nuking, basically taking the wildness out of it. But we don't play with those tanks. It takes much longer, and we plan on that. We inspect the hell out of them, and we trust that system. At home, I think you can do that with impeccable care and attention to temperature, and you're using good caustic, and basically crossing your T's, dotting your I's. If you have the funds and the space to have separate, I recommend it, but it's not a necessity if you're impeccable with your techniques.
Is that unique to Brett and other wild, or would you say that that's something that you would recommend doing with other Belgian origin yeast strains?
Well, I mean, you can use an Abbey yeast to make a triple, not really wild. If you're talking about PDO, lacto, Brett, that world, I think you'd be okay reusing that equipment for those types of beers. Still, do your cleaning in between, but don't go back to an IPA or a lager or something. I think you'd be asking for trouble.
I have more of a statement. Whoever runs your social is amazing.
Yeah, that's taken off in the last few years. We found him at Stonyfield Yogurt. He's a social media whiz.
Yeah, you got to find that. No,
we have a whole in-house marketing team that's just devoted to that. And I don't know if you guys seen anything last week. Speaking of social media, I mean, they did a week in Maine last week, and it just made me just feel like I was there. Those guys,
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing.
Thank you.
I'm on your
I'm
on your Instagram account.
Yeah.
I'm like the adjuncts. I came here for the beer, and I'm just there's blueberries.
Exactly. I mean, that's kind of our no pun intended main thing to do is to bridge that gap of Maine and Georgia, or Maine and South Carolina, North Carolina, anywhere to make you feel like you're there. And I think our social media paints an
Big
awesome
time.
picture of that.
We
for
have
sure.
excellent photography, and the man behind it all kind of weaves it together well. But thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
I'm not on social media, but I view it at work, and it's always impressive. You won't ever see me in any social media. I dodge.
It was pretty spectacular for me.
You're such a brewer.
I dodge. I didn't know you were going to be here doing this.
I was gonna say, almost all the brewers I know, they're just completely oblivious to social media.
Yeah, we couldn't
It's
tell you
something
were a
that's mindset.
scientist or anything. I'll be your scientist.
Cool. Anybody else? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So I know you guys are like by no means an IPA brewery, and that's awesome. I love those beers regardless. But my question is, obviously, I'm sure everybody knows the New England style IPA is taking swarm across the U.S. Do you guys have any plans to make anything similar to that, or to like throw like a Brett twist on that, or an Allagash twist on that at all?
It wouldn't be going out on a limb to say no.
Okay.
Those beers are being made in our neighborhood, up the street, around us, in our town. That's not our game.
Yeah, I get it.
We make coffee table beer, which has a touch of haze to it. That's kind of for mouthfeel, and not hazy for the sake of you know, looking like an orange juice.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're asking me personally about New England IPAs, I think flavor, aroma, mouthfeel, that's what I'm going to judge it on, not how hazy is it. You know, and at the end of the day, I'm going to judge it by the traditional characteristics, and if it happens to be hazy but meets all those normal criteria, I'm a fan. I'll buy it. I'll take it. I'll seek it out. But that comes up a lot when I travel and meet other brewers at different breweries. Basically, right away, they're like, "What's going on? How are they making that beer so hazy? Is it really applesauce? Are they dumping flour in there? Craziness."
There's a lot of fantastic ones. There's a lot of ones that are kind of shitty, and they're just they're kind of hazy to be hazy. They have no
I hear
taste.
you. I hear you. I think there's something called yeast bite. If you throw too many cells in your final product, you're not getting hop bitterness. You're getting yeast bite bitterness, which bothers me.
Yeah, sure.
But people have different thresholds for that. You have any comments on New England? We can't compete. We're not competing in that environment.
No, I mean, I think, you know, obviously with our brewery being a Belgian-style brewery, Belgian forward, yeast forward brewery, we'll throw different variations with hops. Got one that just came down, landed in on Monday, Bread IPA, which is, you know, an IPA with bread in it, or like you said, hoppy table beer, or we do Hugh Malone, which is an IPA with a Belgian yeast in it. So I mean, to kind of not necessarily conform to say because we're in New England and we have to brew that. You know, it's you know, like somebody saying they've got to brew a common style beer because they're in San Francisco. You know. Yeah. So yeah.
You guys keep doing it.
Yeah, 100%. You know, no, we love, like you said, literally we have, we can skip rocks to the next breweries over. They're doing phenomenal beers.
We're
you know,
friends with those breweries.
Yeah.
We drink those beers when we go out. You know, we love when those beers show up at the brewery. We just don't make those beers.
Yeah, I get that. Just because you're from that area,
yeah.
I have to make sure that water.
Right.
It's happening. They're doing it well. Like, that's now a style.
Yeah.
It's official.
Question on distribution. The guy that works here said you're in 17 states. If you would ask me, I probably would have guessed it was like double that, just because how long you've been around for. Is that by design? Is there scale to expand beyond that if you wanted to? Like those types of questions?
So, you know, just kind of dial into what we've done over the past couple of years. 2006, we were in 26 states in DC. We saw that we weren't able to keep up with the quality of beer, the distribution aspects that come with that. We were with the correct, yeah. So we were actually with the sales brokerage then, who pretty much went out and sold our beer for us.
Amongst other beers.
Yeah, amongst other beers.
Right.
Beers. So since then we pulled back 17 states and DC. We've added a salesman in every single one of those states. There's
dedicated Allagash.
Yeah, there's area managers over those states. There's East Coast, West Coast sales managers. There's a national sales manager. We want to make sure that we're sending the best quality of beer out, that we're doing our best sales quality in those markets that we do before we expand back into markets that we were in, or even into new markets. You know, the guy that was worked here before me covered 3 states. You know, I'm just over Georgia, so it makes, you know, I get to see people that, you know, he probably wasn't able to see because of the amount of travel time. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of the people that have taken care of us over the years before we expand. I've read multiple articles that of craft beer sales that say don't expand for the next couple of years, just the way things are going now. But our sales have went since 2006. I want to say we sold right at 15,000 barrels. We sold just over 100,000 barrels last year in 10 less states, pretty much. So
it's kind of like going deeper in the markets we're in.
Right. Yeah.
You know, before we go get free business in a new state. But I think there'll be another state. Nobody really knows which state it's going to be. That's the top question. And when are you going to put white beer in a can? That's another big question.
Well, if you're not going to start brewing beers, you're not going to start brewing beers.
Well, a lot of us do things outdoors, and the cans are nice to pack out.
So, what is the answer? When are you going to do the white beer in a can?
It's
Now
on-
that you brought it up, we get it.
Rob always says that he would personally, Rob Tod owns the brewery, started the brewery. White was his brainchild. He would love to have white beer in a can, but we've got bigger fish to fry at the brewery in the markets that we're in. To do it right would be a distraction right now. It's not impossible, and it's not out of the question in the future, but there are no immediate plans. That's expensive equipment. It's more space to house that equipment, more staff, more. To do it right, to do it our way.
Cans, why 4-packs, when you're getting bigger packaging, that type of thing. So that's the ever-changing world of the business for sure. I mean, if you were to ask somebody 5 years ago, why are you doing cans? That type of question. So it's crazy the way the business goes for sure.
Kegger uses steam and chemicals because some of those kegs come in, they've been sitting outside, who knows what's in there. We don't use steam on like a dirty fermenter, just super hot water, chemical. We use pretty good chemicals. It depends. Like that wild facility, we know it's wild. You can't kill the whole building. So
If you try to kill it all, you need some
there's 4 ingredients to CIPing, cleaning in place: temperature, time, chemical concentration, and agitation. So some combination of all of that. There are graphs. That is how you kill microbes and get off soils. So we're killing where we need to kill, and sometimes a barrel just gets a hot water flush instead of any chemical, and we put beer right back in it.
That's how I wash most of my dishes, so I mean, you're good.
A little bit of chemical, hot water. Cool.
There's a company in Springfield. Yes. Is it Missouri? Yes. Look, I haven't been on that visit, but we do send people down there. They're a great partner of ours. Another company called Zeman, which is German, I believe. They make the gigantic 480s, which, do we have an outdoor picture? They're huge. That's 8 Braucon batches. These are the Zemans. They're tucked back there. Big. What about the coolship? Oh, we had that made in Maine by a company called Zajac, a local fat company.
What's 06?
Gave them the dimensions. They produced it. It's fun when the hot wort goes in. It slowly spreads over the room temperature stainless, and all of a sudden it just makes this loud crash as it changes, in its composition.
stainless or not copper?
Stainless. I think, I want to say 08. We had moved into the new brewery in 07 and cooked up that idea shortly thereafter. You're gonna be there what, Saturday?
I'll be there Friday and Saturday.
And you'll get some resurgam. You'll get some resurgam. Where's Brittany? What?
Quick question. Maybe tough answer. What's your favorite brewery besides Allagash?
Personally,
Yeah.
it's usually something I can't get in Maine. Because once you have it available, it gets a little bit less thrilling.
Yeah.
I will always seek out Boulevard 10-7. That's a personal fave. That's my jam.
Hey, it's on that.
When it's fresh, it's hoppy and delicious. When it's not fresh, it's still delicious.
Yeah.
Ray, what do you think, Ray?
But you,
Not of that, but like, what would you name if you could grab one beer out of thin air and put in your fridge?
I usually, gravitate toward like West Coast styles, just kind of old school. So I love out there. The brewery's really good. They do some awesome things out there. So
I'm going to just wrap this discussion and jump in. I appreciate everybody for coming out, and I'm sure there's lots of other questions. I'm going to leave you with one last question, and then thank you so much for sampling us on all of your fantastic beers. We talked about hazy beer, we talked about IPAs, and obviously Allagash has kind of bucked the system and done what they wanted, and it's been a success. Particularly with white, particularly with Curieux, that people come in, at least I know, and ask for, but we do have Avance and Uncommon and Fluxus now, 16 counties. I know that there has been a huge push to introduce the rest of the world to either a Belgian style or just change the conception of the palate from bitter IPA forward to slightly perceived bitterness, but a little bit funkier. And if you were going to go shop this to another venue, to whether it's a restaurant and to another consumer, what would you describe as that bridging profile as we head out the door?
To go
Hard
from
questions.
to go from our kind of
Someone says, I like West Coast IPA. What do you have in your portfolio that will work?
to kind of expand their horizons into the world of funky.
Yeah.
Interlude used to be an old standby, especially for folks who have, have a taste for wine, because that's certainly bred forward, but there's some wine backbone. That pairs really well with food. Curieux is a fun one. A lot of people that don't know that there are pale-colored bourbon barrel-aged beers. A lot of them are just giant stouts. So we have a lot of success expanding horizons with Curieux, even if you're not a bourbon lover. Coolship would be like an inculcation by fire, like a trial by fire, because that's so fun. Ray, what do you think is a good training wheels?
I mean, talking West Coast and West Coast IPAs, and the craze, hobby table beer, which we worked on for years to dial it in and get the profile of it. It's an awesome gateway with the hops. It's got a little coriander in it. Uses the Belgian yeast strain, so you kind of have that teeter-totter aspect of what you're used to from the hops, which
Belgian
are
kick.
Yeah, and with the Belgian kick in it.
Fresh little bread is mosaic bread explosion. And as it gets a little time under its belt, the bread kind of takes over and the mosaic, as all hoppy beers with time, fades. But fresh, that is a great bridge, because you've got your traditional hoppy flavor, which is all the rage right now, and with me too, but you've also got the bread. And together, I think there's your bridge, for example.
Well, thank you so
for
much.
having us.
It was our pleasure having you.
Thanks,
you for
guys,
sampling
for sticking around.